My name is Rich Terendi. Hopefully all of you can see my screen. If you have any questions during the presentation, I'm going to show you how to either raise your hand electronically or type into the chat box. But thank you again in advance for your time. We should be able to wrap this up within an hour or maybe an hour and 15 minutes. Throughout the presentation here, if you'd like to raise your hand, that's certainly one way of letting me know that you have a question. And you can also directly type your question into the chat box that should appear on your screen. Depending on what interface you have, you either have something on the right side of your screen, or if you're using a web-based interface, the icons in the interface may appear a little bit different. But please feel free to ask questions at any time throughout the presentation. I want to give you just a little bit of background very briefly on Vision Quest. Vision Quest 2020 is a nonprofit organization, and we are solely dedicated to addressing the early detection of vision disorders as well as preventable blindness in school-age children. So among the education and advocacy that the organization provides on a national level, we're also honored to provide the training for EyeSpy 2020. We also provide training on other vision screening techniques as well. But hopefully by the time we're done today, you'll have an appreciation for why we focus a lot of our energy on EyeSpy 2020 when it comes to school-age children. So today, and this looks like a long list, but we'll get through this very quickly. So we're going to be covering a lot of information. The other thing that I should mention is that we are recording the webinar. So there's no need to take notes. I'll be emailing all of you a link to the video, as well as showing you resources that are available on our website so that you can reference that information as well. And just so that you know who you're talking to, sometimes that helps to put a face to the name. I have the privilege of co-founding Vision Quest 2020 with a pediatric ophthalmologist by the name of Dr. James ONeill, nationally recognized, brilliant individual. I also serve as the Chief Executive Officer for Cloudscaper, which is the technology company that actually has developed EyeSpy 2020. So as you can see, hopefully on the screen, I am a geek by profession. I'm an electrical and computer engineer by degree, and I've developed a number of patents in some different industries, including vision. And now, about 20 years ago, not quite 20 years ago, but it's rapidly approaching that, I've taken some background in software, database, and security knowledge, and have applied it to vision screening. And that is what EyeSpy 2020 is. So actually, what is EyeSpy 2020? For some of you may be familiar with the program already. For those of you that have not seen it before, you'll see it today. But simply put, EyeSpy 2020 from a child's perspective is just a really simple matching game. It takes about 3 minutes. It's just from the kid's perspective, it's a video game, and that's not accidental, by the way. But behind the scenes is a very complex piece of software that's actually evaluating the child's entire visual system. And so I look forward to sharing with you how it does that. But before we get into some of the technical aspects of EyeSpy, I just want to give, and again, I apologize if I'm preaching to the choir, but I just want to share with some of you what the impetus is behind EyeSpy 2020. So when you talk about addressing a public health dilemma, there are two things that you're looking for. You're looking for prevalence and you're looking for severity. In other words, if vision problems only affected 1 out of every 100,000 children, it might not be something that, again, from a public health standpoint, you might not address it so aggressively. But unfortunately, vision problems actually impact, depending on the age group, up to 1 in 4 children. And actually, those numbers are increasing. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But suffice it to say, about 25% of kids. And when we talk about severity of a particular health issue, that's another thing that is strikingly potent when it comes to looking at vision. And I'm going to get into a little bit more detail here in just a minute, but suffice it to say that vision is very important for overall quality of life, general health, and obviously has a direct impact on education, child's ability to learn. To add insult to injury, however, low-income children and children that are already struggling academically happen to be disproportionately affected by vision problems. And that is extraordinarily expensive to the economy as a whole and to individual school districts when having to provide remediation services to children. And again, preaching to the choir, so I apologize for that. So I'm going to go through a couple of studies real quick. 20 years ago, much of what I'm sharing with you was purely anecdotal, and now there's been and continues to be lots of scientific and medical research, independent research, not our research, that actually validates the linkage between vision disorders and long list of maladies that afflict children. So, for example, here's a study from 2012. Talks about 20% of children in the United States have uncorrected vision disorders. That's insane, particularly when you think about that 80% of what children learn during their first 12 years comes through their eyes, through the visual processing of information. I want to point something out. If a child is blind, if we know that a child can't see, we have the ability, obviously, to teach that child very effectively. But we have to know that they have a vision problem. What we're talking about, and the real dilemma here, is when children can't see the blackboard and they don't know that they should be able to see the blackboard, or they have a color vision deficiency and yet no one knows that they have a color vision deficiency. So as a result, vision problems can easily be misunderstood, misinterpreted for learning problems. And it happens all too frequently, as I'm sure some of you have seen. In fact, there are certain vision disorders that have either a correlation to the misdiagnosis or the exacerbation of attention-related disorders. So children with certain vision disorders are 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with attention-related disorders. And that's hugely problematic because, as you can appreciate, if you put a child on psychotropic medication for dealing with a disorder, attention-related disorder, when in fact they don't have one, it can be catastrophic. Having said that, I do want to just state overtly that obviously children that really do struggle, or adults that truly do struggle with attention-related disorders, stand to benefit from medicine. So I'm not against medication at all. I'm just simply suggesting that if you misdiagnose a child, just like with an adult, if you're not giving them the proper medication, it's obviously less than ideal. We talked about general health, and it's interesting, when children that have a chronic hearing or vision condition are twice as likely to suffer from obesity. So again, direct correlation to general health. The incidence of obesity increases from 12.2 to 18.4. That's a 50% increase. Also, when we talk about academic performance, again, once again, there are certain vision disorders that actually slow a child's ability to read. And as all of you can appreciate, that has massive implications when it comes to advancing a child through their academic career, which is perhaps the single most important thing that we can do for our children. So all of this adds up to something numerically, if you will, and that is, what is the return on investment when it comes to vision screening children, right? We all have limited resources, limited time, limited dollars. So if we're going to direct our dollars most effectively, why focus on vision screening? Well, again, this is not my study. This comes from the Michigan Association for Public Health. And every few years, they go out and do a study of all of their publicly funded preventative health programs. And as you can see, vision screening just doesn't offer the most significant return on investment. It's far and above the highest ROI. And the reason for that is for all the reasons that I've already been articulating. So vision literally touches every facet of a child's existence. And if we can intercede in and detect vision problems early in life, there's tremendous benefits. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but for any of you that are interested in kind of doing a rough estimate of the ROI for a particular district, there is a calculator available on the website, EyeSpy2020.com. I'll review this information later as far as the website is concerned. But just to let you know, there is a calculator, and it does a very conservative estimate on how many dollars school districts will enjoy, so to speak, by, or realize, I should say, by vision screening their student body. And there are references cited at the bottom of the calculator because, again, these aren't our calculations. We've just provided the calculator for you. So I am monitoring as best I can. I'm not the best at multitasking, but I am looking to see if anyone's raised their hand. I don't see that, and I don't see any messages in the chat box, which is fine. But at any point, you don't have to wait for these slides to pop up where I ask for questions. If you have any questions anytime, please just let me know, and I will do my best to answer them. So having said that, I want to talk a little bit about the history of vision screening, just for context. I think it's really valuable just to have an honest discussion about how vision screens have been performed in the past. So up until recently, there really has been no standardized approach. Now, I'm going to share with you one standardized approach that has existed, but for the most part, vision screens have been more of an art than a science. The most prolific method has been using eye charts, the wall chart. And as some of you or all of you may be very familiar, you really need to know what you're doing. If you're going to use a wall chart, it requires a lot of training and in some states even certification. On top of that, you have to be very skilled in interpreting the results that you're receiving from the child. Once you've done that successfully, you then need to record and subsequently report the results to the children's parents or guardians. And this record keeping, as you can appreciate, is laborious. Again, I'm assuming here that I'm preaching to the choir because this is what you've been dealing with if you vision screen your students. So the question is, how do 20% of the children in this country walk around with vision problems that have been missed? And at the end of the day, an eye chart vision screening, again, the most common form, it has some significant challenges or shortcomings. So children can peek or memorize the chart because the chart is a static document. So children have the ability to memorize the chart. And we already talked about the fact that you've got to be very highly trained and skilled in the art of vision screening to use a wall chart. These trained individuals, if they don't reside within your school, they need to then travel to where the students are. At the end of the day, vision screenings are extraordinarily costly to both health and especially education, particularly if they're not done accurately. And then we already talked about the laborious task of record, keeping and reporting. So that's kind of how screenings have been done. Now, I had mentioned that there was no standardized approach. It's not exactly true. This is the gold standard. This is the protocol that should be adhered to. It's called the Amblyopia Treatment Study Visual. If that weren't a mouthful enough, you can see that these 9 pages encapsulate what needs to be essentially committed to memory and then subsequently executed every single time. So as you can appreciate, from a pragmatic standpoint, this protocol is really almost never adhered to. And in fact, if you were to execute or perform this protocol fully, it takes about 10 to 15 minutes per child to assess their visual acuity. So there are some significant shortcomings with using a wall chart. The question then becomes, what do the medical professionals recommend? Knowing all of these shortcomings, what do the medical professionals recommend? Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Academy of Ophthalmology and the American Association for Pediatric Ophthalmology and Strabismus and the American Association of Certified Orthotists, they've all gotten together and they said, look, we need to put out a policy statement because there's some, admittedly, a little bit of confusion with some of these fantastic new devices that are coming onto the market. In fact, in the lower right portion of your screen, you'll see one of those devices. It's an amazing device called the Welch Allyn Spot. These objective screenings, and I'm going to talk about in just a second, what is the difference between objective versus subjective. But suffice it to say that these objective devices are acceptable for children up to age 5. But it's very clear in the recommendations that once a child is of school age, we should be doing subjective screenings, which is incredible when you think about it, because we just went through a litany of shortcomings about subjective screenings. So that begs the question, if there's all these shortcomings and all these challenges with doing a subjective screening, why is it still recommended for school-age children? In order to answer that question, we have to first understand, what do we mean when we talk about an objective screening? So an objective screening is using essentially a camera which takes measurements of the child's eyes and then uses these measurements to evaluate for risk factors, okay? So it's not evaluating the child's ability to see, it's taking measurements of the eyes and then evaluating for risk factors. And more importantly, it doesn't look beyond the child's eyes. Remember what I'm talking about here, because I'm going to show you diagrammatically what that means. A subjective screening is exactly what any of you have had done if you've gone to an optometrist or an ophthalmologist, right, where they put that phoropter in front of your face and they say A or B, B or C, and they're asking you, hey, does this help you see better, or do you see more clearly with this? And in fact, that is what you're performing on your students if you use a wall chart, because it's subjective, right? You have to look at the results or the feedback from the child, and then you're subjectively evaluating. This is the recommended method for school-age children, because what you're doing in the process is you're evaluating their entire visual system. You're looking at the child's ability to see. You need to be very well trained. It takes a long time. There's a lot of interpretation, but this is what is recommended for school-age children. Now, diagrammatically, what are we talking about? Diagrammatically, an objective vision screening just looks at what you're seeing up on the screen right now. Those are supposed to be the eyeballs of the child, okay? That's what those devices, those cameras, just look at that. However, as you can appreciate, the vision of a child and an adult is comprised of more than just eyeballs. You've got the optic nerve, you've got the vision center of the brain, and then you've got the cognitive programming or cognitive function of the vision center of the brain. So to only look at the eyeballs does not tell you whether or not a child can see. If they're missing an optic nerve, if there is something neurologically going on, if the programming of the brain is not correct, they can have perfectly round eyes and not be able to see. So what we wanted to do was actually blend the best of both worlds. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, these objective devices, these cameras, are really easy to use, and you don't need to be certified in order to use them for vision screening. So we wanted that same type of technology for school-age children. So that's what we did. We developed a technology that blends the automation and the simplicity of an objective device with the medical recommendations of assessing visual acuity. And in the process of doing that, we also added in the ability to assess depth perception and color vision. And because we're using a computer, because we wanted to make it a game to psychosocially engage children, we now automate the collection and reporting of the screening results. So that was the objective, and that's what was accomplished with EyeSpy. So because it's a randomized, automated computer game, children no longer have the ability to cheat or memorize the system. The protocols are adhered to with 100% accuracy because it's the computer making the decisions. You're no longer having to evaluate the responses of the child. Therefore, you don't need any training. It's very fast and cost effective. And it, like I said, it does the data collection for you. So this is a little bit redundant. I don't want to spend too much time on this except to point out a couple things. The reporting, it's available in English or Spanish, which is obviously helpful depending on your student population. And it's available on an individual basis. So certain students, you may wish to print the reports in Spanish rather than English. And because it's a software program, you can't break it. If something were to happen to your computer, whether it got lost, stolen, damaged, whatever, you just download the software again and you're up and running. So that's incredibly important because with those other devices, if you drop the device, you know, you're out $7,000 or more dollars. So with regards to the excitement behind EyeSpy, at least that I have, it's not enough for me to state or proselytize that it's accurate. And therefore, what we did was we submitted the program to the Medical University of South Carolina. They have the Storm Eye Institute, which is one of the top 10 ophthalmic clinics in the world. They took EyeSpy 2020 and they engaged Boy Scouts, untrained, in performing vision screenings on younger students. And what they found, and by the way, this report's available on our website, so you can download it, print it, and read it. But basically what they concluded was that there was no significant difference between EyeSpy 2020 and the results achieved from a gold standard professional eye examination. Now, that is of significance. Before I move on from this slide, I just want to say something. EyeSpy 2020 is and never will be a replacement for a full eye exam. It would be fantastic if every child could go and get their vision screened every year by an optometrist or ophthalmologist. But that is not logistically or financially pragmatic. And so we are very excited that EyeSpy offers a very accurate and reliable vision screening, but I don't want you to think that we are somehow stating that children should not be seen by an eye care professional. This tool is designed to identify those children that need to be seen by an eye doctor, but it is not a diagnostic tool, and it is not a therapeutic tool. It's only to identify those children that need to be seen. With regards to the data, I'm not going to go through a whole lot of detail here, except to say that the data, your data, is encrypted and stored in a centralized data repository that you don't have to maintain, but only you have access to that data. And when I say you have access to that data, I'm talking about individual screening reports, summary reports. You can export the data into Excel. You can even export the data into your own data system. So what I would like to do here, and again, I don't see any hands and I don't see any questions. So what I want to do is just give you a very, very quick demonstration of EyeSpy. And when you're done seeing this, oh, my apologies. I think I need to, there we go. Okay. When you're done seeing this, I think that you'll see just how easy it is to use EyeSpy. So I've got EyeSpy up on the computer. There are two ways by which you enter in information about the student that you're about to screen. One way is to just type in the information about the student like I'm doing up here, right? So you can just type in the information as you want and then proceed with the vision screening as you would normally. And when I say normally, I mean with EyeSpy 2020. So, in other words, if you don't have the information about the child or about the student already uploaded into the EyeSpy database, you can simply type their information in just like I did on the screen in front of you. However, EyeSpy 2020, that centralized data repository that I talked about, also has the ability to receive your student rosters. Now, obviously, your IT departments would be involved in this transaction, but you can upload your student rosters, and then instead of having to type in all this information, you would just say select student from list. When you do that, you're presented with, and these are all fake students, but you can see I've got 1,500 students in here. So let's say I was looking for a student, first name Charles. So I start to type in the beginning parts of his name or her name here. I could further filter. Let's say that I happen to know that this particular child is in kindergarten. So you can do multiple searches and they all further reduce your list. So now instead of having 1,500 students, I only have 2 students. So it helps me find the student very quickly. I double click on their name, and now all of their information is immediately loaded into this area. The only information that is not inputted automatically is the status of their prescription glasses or contacts. Quite frankly, we hope that none of your students are in contacts, certainly not in elementary school, but that's a topic for another day. Independent of that statement, the proctor, the person proctoring the vision screening, has to ask the child, if it's not evident, whether or not they have glasses. Obviously, if they're wearing their glasses, you'd see that. Whether they forgot them at home, or whether or not those glasses have been lost or broken. So I'm going to say this student is wearing, in this case, his glasses, because gender was selected as male. And that's it. That's all I have to do. Now, if I want to test the color of that child, the color vision of that child, I would just check that box. It pops up a message about screen color variations from computer to computer. I will say this, the color vision component of this system is very good, but I don't know that I would refer a child to an optometrist based on color vision. Whether they passed or failed color vision, I would just want to be aware of it, because as you know, color vision cannot be medically treated, at least not yet. But it may be helpful to know whether or not the student has a color vision deficiency. Statistically speaking, boys are much more, they're 10 times more likely to be suffering with a color vision deficiency than girls. That's not to say you shouldn't test girls for color blindness. Color vision only needs to be tested once. So unlike visual acuity that you would want to be assessing annually, color vision only needs to be tested once. So let's say we want to test Charles's color vision. So now I click begin screening. So here's the good news. If you've never used EyeSpy before, you got nothing to worry about, because EyeSpy is going to tell you right on the screen exactly what you need to do every step of the way. So in this case, it's basically telling you, hey, make sure that his glasses are clean, that there's no eye patch or colored glasses at this time. He's just wearing his regular prescription lenses, and press enter when ready. Now, this may sound a little bit confusing. I'm going to show you a diagram in just a few minutes of what it looks like in real life when you're using EyeSpy. So you'll be standing up at the computer where EyeSpy is running. The child is going to be sitting 10 feet away with the mouse. And so if I move the mouse right now and I'm clicking, it doesn't do anything. It's only going to start once you press the enter key. Now the child has the mouse, and the first thing that we're going to have Charles do is pick his character. Now, there's no right or wrong answer here. So in this case, Charles likes the character with green hair, and he clicks the button. So this engages the child psychosocially as far as picking their character. The other thing that it does is it teaches them how to move the mouse left to right and then click. The idea of the matching is very obvious, but if you find that a child doesn't know what to do, just explain to them to match up, to line up, and then click when it matches. What I find is helpful is I usually start with the older students and then have the younger students watch the older students during the transition, say from 3rd to 2nd grade. I'll start with the 3rd graders, and then I'll let the first group of 2nd graders watch the 3rd graders, because obviously they know how to play, and so on and so forth, so that by the time I get down to kindergarten, the first group is observing the current group under test, and they understand the matching concept. A couple things about what EyeSpy is doing for you. If you notice, the optotypes or the letters at the top of the screen are HOTV. That's not always going to be the case. The letters at the top will change automatically based on the child's age. So you don't have to worry about using the right chart. EyeSpy selects the correct chart for you. The other thing that you'll notice is that the target letter at the bottom of the screen gets smaller, again, automatically. You don't have to worry about what line you're on. It's going to proceed through the chart on your behalf and get smaller or show the correct optotype size on your behalf. Sometimes you'll see the letter get smaller, sometimes you'll see it get bigger. Again, it's doing all of that for you automatically. Now that the child has demonstrated that they can see with both eyes open, now we're going to occlude his left eye. So we're about to test his right eye. So it tells you, place a patch over the student's left eye under his corrective lenses. And we provide that for you, obviously, that patch. So now I want to show you something just real quick. I'm going to get the answer wrong just so that you see a couple things. One, there's no negative consequence. He just did not get the cartoon animation. And the second thing is that the optotype at the bottom of the screen got larger. So that is called a reinforcement gate, and that's doing exactly what it sounds like. It's reinforcing the child's play, for lack of, I hate to use the word play, but participation in the game. So if the child inadvertently misclicked or got distracted temporarily, it's not going to, quote unquote, penalize the child or misinterpret the results. It's going to show them a larger optotype to get them back on track. Now that we know that the child can see in the right eye, now we're going to test their left eye, so you've moved the patch over. The older students, you'll see that they move the patch themselves if they can read the instructions on the screen. I'm just going to go through this. One thing to point out is that sometimes EyeSpy 2020 will take 30 seconds for a child to play the game, and other times it'll take 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. The average test time is about 2.5 minutes. If a child, so here's the irony: the better the child can see, the longer the test takes. That's because as soon as we know that the child will benefit or needs a professional examination, we stop the test. So in this case, between all the talking that I'm doing and the fact that I'm getting the answers right, it's taking a protracted amount of time. But don't expect the test to always take a certain amount of time or for the test to appear the same, even if you retest the same child. Because it's randomized, it's also evaluating the student's reaction 1,000 times a second, and it's adjusting itself in real time. So those are some subtleties that are different than, say, an eye chart on the wall, where it's somewhat predictable or consistent in its presentation. So now it says remove the patch, make sure the kid's still wearing his glasses. So we're going to do that. And now we're doing the color vision screening. We start off with 2 color confusion plates that are visible even if the child has color blindness. So even if you're colorblind, you can see that there's a circle in that shape there. Once you proceed past that and demonstrate comprehension, now we introduce color confusion plates where we can detect mild to severe color vision blindness or color blindness. So I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly just because, and again, if you have questions, I want to answer them. I just didn't want to belabor the point. Now we're going to show a stereogram, a random dot stereogram up on the computer screen, again at a test distance of 10 feet. And it's instructing you to remove the patch and now put the colored glasses over the student's corrective lenses. So unless you have on your red-blue glasses that were provided to you, you can't see what shape is in there, and nor can I. So what's happening is basically you can try and guess your way, for lack of a better term, through the test, but statistically it's impossible to do that. If you can't see the shape popping out, you don't have depth perception. So the question is, why isn't it failing the child? And I did that intentionally because I want to explain another component of EyeSpy. EyeSpy also ascertains whether or not you should be referring a child to the eye doctor. So why aren't, if the child, I got the stereo answers incorrect, just so that you know, I got it wrong. So why am I not referring the child? The reason why I'm not referring the child is because they already are under the care of an optometrist. They're already wearing their glasses. So you don't want to refer a child to an optometrist or ophthalmologist just for failed stereo. If they had failed their visual acuity, we would still refer them. But they pass their visual acuity, which means the prescription is accurate. And now what we're suggesting is that you're not going to send that child. Nothing would frustrate the parents more or the guardians more if they were over-referred, right? And that is a case where we are preventing an over-referral because actually their visual acuity passed. A couple things I want to point out. If you want to press the S key, there's the report in Spanish. If you want it back in English, you press E. You might also notice that there's, it just says right eye pass, left eye pass, color vision. It doesn't give you more details. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to show you how to get more information or less information on the report with the click of a button. So remember, we just screened Charles Lewis. So now I have the privilege of showing you some of the reporting features. I'm going to go into reports, and I'm going to pull up vision screenings that I've done since September. So if I wanted to look from August, I could just click this button and then say show most recent. Another thing is you can always put in your own dates here. So if I wanted to go back a year, I could do that just as easily. So I want to look for Charles. So I'm going to put in Charles. There he is, and I'm going to double click the report. But I want to point something out. Down here at the bottom, it says pass fail. I want some more detail about Charles, so I'm going to click the detailed radio button, and now I'm going to double click his report. And now you'll notice I get visual acuity information about the vision screen. Again, I can show in Spanish, I can show in English. I'm going to go back again. Let's say that you're sending out reports and you're getting a little bit too many phone calls about the reports that you're sending home. You don't even want to send home pass fail. You just want to send out an overall result. I want to show you what that report looks like. No information. You're just saying the vision screening was normal. So all of the detail for that particular vision screening is not being displayed. I want to show you something else here if I could. I want to show you what it looks like if a child has failed a vision screening, just so that you have an idea. Because the report looks a little bit different. Oops, let me go back. I want to show you detail on the report. My apologies. By the way, the default is detailed. I had just set it to pass fail for purposes of demonstration. You can also set the default language that you want the reports printed in, or if you click default, that will be language that you indicated when you inputted the student's information prior to vision screening. If that's confusing, I'll show you that in just a second. So you can force the reports to appear in English, Spanish, or the preference based on the language of the child. I'll show you that in just a second. But here's what a referral looks like. So notice that this child failed stereo, but they were not prescribed glasses. So child failed stereo, never been prescribed glasses. So now we say, okay, this screening suggests your child may have a vision problem. If your child's not currently under the care of an eye doctor, an exam is recommended. Okay, and again, Spanish or English. Okay, now let's go back to what this default thing means. And just exit. Oh, a couple things. This is where you can print your summary reports. You can print however many reports are currently up on the screen. So however you filter this list, see how it says now print all 27 reports. If I show just the passes, that number changes to 17. If I accidentally unclick both, I get nothing because I basically said I don't want to see any reports. Here's where I just want to look at those children that were referred. And I'm going to talk about the difference between a fail, refer, and there's another situation in which children are referred. I'm going to show you that real quick. So you see this comp. So we have comp, we have fail, and then we have refer. And the question is, what's the difference? Here's refer. So this is referred by a proctor. This is where the child is being evaluated and the proctor stops the vision screening for whatever reason at his or her discretion and says, I want this child to be referred. So it says referred by proctor, okay? And you're allowed to do that. If a child is demonstrating something that is of concern to you and you want to manually generate a referral, you can do that. A fail is when they complete the vision screening and there's something of concern. And then something of concern detected by the system. And then comp is a little bit unique. So comprehension is, or comp, C-O-M-P, is where the child was unable to have the vision screening performed. And this happens if the child has a substantial visual deficit, or if they just simply didn't understand the concept. We don't know what the reason is. So we say we're unable to verify comprehension. So again, not a diagnostic tool. It's just saying the child could not get their vision screened because they either didn't understand the matching concept, or they have such a substantial visual deficit that they couldn't even, they couldn't match the largest of letters. If a child is not demonstrating comprehension, the game will stop and it will tell you, please make sure that the child understands the matching game concept and restart the test. So it does that for you automatically. Just wanted to mention that. It's not something that you have to determine. And you can export all of the records into Excel as well. So you can print a summary report, you can print all the reports on the screen in any language, and you can export your data to Excel. This default, I just want to talk about this real quick. What does default mean? So let's say I'm going to print all 50 vision screening reports, but I want the language to be based on the individual student, not necessarily all in English or all in Spanish, but based on the student. That information is right here. So when we say default report, so if I'm screening a particular student and I want their report in Spanish, if I select it here, then when I go into reports and I say default, it will print in Spanish for this particular child. Okay? So a little bit of a drink out of a fire hose. I apologize, but the one thing that I hope you understand is that this is extraordinarily simple to use. Although there's a ton of capability, it's a very simple system to use. In the user's manual, we talk about this section. You do have the ability to input near visual acuity results if that's something that you do within your district. You have the ability to turn off animation. So if you're vision screening older children and they are not, quote unquote, entertained by the animation, you can turn that off here just by clicking that button. If you don't want what is called critical line visual acuity being measured, in other words, you require an exact VA, or sometimes referred to as threshold VA, then you click that box. It will take a little bit longer. The screening will take just a little bit longer, but on the report, you're going to get their exact VA for each eye. One thing I want to demonstrate here real quick is if you've got feedback, sometimes you guys want to provide feedback that you can take credit for, like you wouldn't mind us calling you back and asking you more questions. In other instances, you might not want to be identified. So you might want to say something where you don't want to take credit for that. And that's okay. This is truly anonymous. And we do this purposely. There's no way that we know where this is coming from, because we don't want people to be, quote unquote, afraid of saying what's on their mind. So you can say whatever you want here, and it is completely okay. Just say whatever it is that's on your mind, because that's how this product was designed by and for you, the educators, the nurses, the administrators, the schools. So it's not for medical professionals, it's for you. And so if there's a way that we can make it better, we want to know, and we don't want you to be afraid to give that feedback. Having said all that, no matter what you say, if you don't want to be identified, there's no way that we're going to know where it's coming from. So if you want us to call you, you got to say, here's my phone number, or here's my email. You know what I mean? And make sure, unlike me, that you're not misspelling it. And leave your name so that we know who we're looking for. Do that. If you're saying something that you don't mind it being attributed, there's no reason to be afraid to tell us anything anyway. I just know the reality is that if you're more likely to speak the truth. So, whatever it is. So let us know any feedback, and then just hit submit. I'm going to take a question right now, because I did get a question, and I want to answer that. My computer, I should have mentioned this a little bit earlier. My computer's a little bit on the fritz, so you might see aberrations on the screen that are not consistent with how the program performs. How does the program, so Michelle asks two questions. So how does the program know the difference between comprehension and visual acuity? How does it know that the child does not understand what to do? Also, what do we do with a child that cannot or will not take the assessment? And then another question from Michelle. How can we as the proctor input that information? So all very good questions, excellent questions. So one at a time. The program actually only knows the difference between comprehension and visual acuity if the child has a minimum visual acuity of 20/80. That's the largest size that we evaluate. So we start at 20/80. If that child has, let's say, 2100 vision, or 2125, or 2200 vision, best vision that they've got, we cannot discern that. We don't know if it's they don't understand or their visual acuity is worse than 20/80. So when we list comprehension, we say we were unable to verify that the child comprehended the game, but we're not making a determination. The message that you get on the screen basically says we want you to confirm that the child understands the concept of the matching game, but we're not able to discern the two. If the child can see 20/80 and they successfully match the optotypes, the letters that are displayed, then we know that the child does indeed comprehend. And in that instance, when we provide you a visual acuity number, it's because we know with statistical certainty that the child understands the concept of the matching game. So if a visual acuity is listed, it's because we know that they understood. And I think that answers the first two questions. If you have a child that cannot or refuses to take the assessment, there is basically the only option at that point is to rescreen them at a different point in time. So let's say that the child is non-compliant because they have a bellyache, or because they have conjunctivitis, or they otherwise don't feel good. Then you're going to want to rescreen them at a later point in time. If you have a child that simply refuses to take the test, that's at the discretion of the school and or the district I certainly am not a proponent of forcing children to receive a vision screening if for whatever reason they're uncomfortable. In that particular case, the proctor will press the space bar. So you've started the vision screening. The student absolutely refuses to participate. You press the space bar, and you'll see when you press it, it will ask you, do you want to stop the screening? Do you want to restart the screening? Do you want to cancel the screening is essentially what it asks. And you can determine the only input that is recorded into the system is if you say, I want to stop the screening and refer the child. There's nowhere in the system where you say, I'm stopping the screening because the child is non-compliant. Okay, so I hope that answers your question, but basically when you stop the test, if you cancel the vision screening, there's no information recorded. The screening is stopped. If you continue the vision screening, then the vision screening results are recorded in the database upon completion. If you stop the screening at that particular point in time and indicate via your selection that you want the child referred, then that's also recorded, and those children are listed under the refer. On the report screen, they fall under refer. And then your last question, which you just added, is how about children with significant disabilities that simply do not understand the screening? Those children are very strong candidates for the objective vision screenings that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. Here's what I would say, Michelle, and it is a very, very good question. It is my professional desire that any child that has significant disabilities is receiving a professional eye examination annually. Having said that, I understand that that's not always reality. EyeSpy 2020 has great success vision screening children that are disabled. So it depends how we define significant disabilities. There is a section in the user's manual that talks about how to screen children, special needs children, with the system. The vast majority of children understand the concept of the matching game. But if you have a child that simply cannot be vision screened in this method, then you're obviously able to vision screen traditionally or with an objective vision screening device like the well-shot spot or the plus optics, or there's actually several techniques. But overall, philosophically, we're proponents of children, special needs children, receiving professional eye examination annually. So, and you're welcome, Michelle, and thank you so much for those questions. Those were fantastic. And please don't stop asking questions, because if you've got those questions, I bet you some other people do as well. I'm not going to spend too much time on this part because I don't want to run out of time. I am so thankful for all of you attending. I don't want to bore you with these details. I'm going to assume that most of you are in the process of implementing EyeSpy. So you don't need to know all this because you're right in the middle of step 3, which is this live webinar. You should have all received activation codes and screening supplies. If you've not, I'm going to give you information to contact me so that we get you taken care of. There is also an online planner on EyeSpy2020.com. It's fairly self-explanatory. If you're looking to estimate, and I mean estimate or approximate, how much time you need to vision screen your students, you can use this calculator. Here's what I will say. The first year that you're vision screening it's a lot, but it's just new. It's just new. That's okay. So just give yourself plenty of time and start slow. What we find is that schools, once they've been using the program for a while, they can estimate better than anyone exactly how long it's going to take them, and they start adding students to their roster to screen more and more grade levels. But this online planner is available. It's also in the user manual, but you're going to want to use it online so that you can plug in the information and get an idea of how long you can vision screen or how much time you need to vision screen. Here's what I'll say is that again, first time out of the gate, it's obviously brand new. So I want to give you this diagram, give you an idea of what it looks like. You can see in this particular example, and this is a fairly standardized approach, you've got 4, 6, 8 computers, however many computers you have, set up on the table. You have another table 10 feet away. So the distance from the screen of the laptop to the eyes of the child is 10 feet. And the way that you measure that when you're setting up is with the extension cables that we've provided you. So those extension cables are exactly 10 feet long. So what you do is you have your partner hold one end of the extension cable up to the screen and the other end extended out to where you're going to have the child sit, and you adjust accordingly, right? Move the laptop back or move the other table back so that the child's sitting at 10 feet. Then you plug that extension cable into your computer and plug your mouse into the other end of the extension cable, and that now provides enough slack so that, as you can see in that picture, the mice, even though you're sitting the child 10 feet away, there's slack enough in those cables so that you're not tripping over them. I hope that makes sense. Another thing is to make sure that there's enough space between the computers. You know what I mean? Because sometimes you're standing between two computers while the children are actually playing the game. And the other thing that I find helpful, this is more anecdotal, but I don't let the kid have the mouse while I'm trying to input their information on the laptop. I pull the mouse back because kids sit down, they want to start moving the mouse around, and I can't navigate the screen when they're moving the mouse around, even though I have my the trackpad on the laptop. So anyway, those things become pretty obvious after, 1 or 2 screenings, but I just wanted to share that with you. When you're setting up, just make sure there's no glare on the screen. You all should have received, because you're already asking questions, I just want to jump ahead and then hope that you guys will continue to ask questions, okay? But let me just, because I'm talking about this, I wanted the train of thought to continue. This is what you guys will receive. Now, the Leia response panel has been replaced with the HOT response panel, so you won't see those shapes on you'll get the response panel that has HOTV. And the response panel is one of the devices that we can use. So back to Michelle's original, or one of her original questions, like when you're screening a child with significant disabilities, the first thing that you do is just see if they can play the game. If they can't play the game, then you play on their behalf. And the way that you determine what their choice is by having them point to what they see on the screen on that response panel. So if that bottom shape or letter is an H, then you wait and let them point to what shape or letter on the response panel, and then you play on their behalf. That's in the case where the child doesn't have the motor skill requirement to control the mouse. You should have also received a quick start guide. If you didn't, don't worry, you can download it from the website. But this is, intended to get you up and running very quickly. And literally, you can train other people how to use the system within 5 minutes. Obviously, they can watch this webinar, they can read the user's manual, but it's really not requisite. The most challenging part, if you will, is just setting it up for the first time. Once you've set up the system the first time, then you're very comfortable with it. So a couple things I want to point out. Just make sure you plug the computers. If you're using laptops, just make sure they're plugged in, because you don't want the batteries to die. And you want the screens to be as bright as possible, which means you want them plugged in. Also adjust the screens just to make sure that there's no glare on the screen, because as you can appreciate, that's a challenge. We already talked about the 10-foot testing distance, but again, I'm just trying to show you it's right from the screen to where the kid's eyes are. Connect the mouse, again, kind of self-explanatory, but just want to point out this is what's contained in that quick start guide. I already mentioned leaving a couple feet of space, but here's the reason why. You can see this proctor. Now, she's actually operating 2 computers simultaneously. When you become familiar with EyeSpy, that's one of the coolest things, is that you can operate, you can screen 2 kids simultaneously. That's 20 kids, 30 kids an hour per person if you're operating 2 laptops. You want to make sure that where the child's going to be, seated, you've got access to the mouse and the glasses and the occluding glasses and all of that. And just note that you don't need a connection to the internet while you're using EyeSpy. So EyeSpy does not require a connection to the internet during the vision screening process, but you are going to want to make sure that the software is updated right before you start, at least the day before you start vision screening. And then obviously after you do the vision screenings, if you're not connected to the internet, you want that data to be up in the data repository. So you're going to want to connect to the internet, launch EyeSpy, and then your data is then accessible from any of your other computers, because it's up in the cloud rather than being locked in on that one computer. So that's kind of the idea there. Again, I know we went through a ton of stuff, so I just want to share with you, please feel free to go to Vision Quest 2020. Go under resources and click on materials, and that way you have access to, the quick start guide if you don't have it. I know that the complete user guide is a large document, so it's not provided because a lot of districts don't even really reference it or need it. But if you want it, it's available for you. But please feel free to go to Vision Quest, get familiar with it. If you're looking to hand out some additional information to your parents beyond the vision screening report, either before or after vision screenings, there's a information handout. There's also informational brochures, all of that fun stuff. So under resources and technical support, so if you go to resources and then click on installation, that's where you're going to direct or provide this information for your IT people. So again, I'm a computer guy, I'm a geek, so maybe I'm a little bit defensive or protective about that particular department within your district. So I'm not trying to be rude, but I just want to let you know, you really do need your IT department to be involved. They're responsible for so much within your district, including all of the computers, the hardware, the software, updates, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they've got a tough deal. So, and you want to have your installation go smoothly. You want them to approve it. In fact, many districts have installation of software prohibited by people other than the IT gurus, and that's with very good reason. It's not, there's no malintent there. They're trying to protect, millions of dollars worth of hardware, and so there's lots of malicious software and all types of bad stuff. So send them to this website. If they click on installation instructions, they get their own special user manual with tons of technical jargon that they will understand. And you guys would probably understand it too, but I'm sure you don't have any disposable time, leisure time, but if you want, you can read that for fun. Here's something important. We want you guys to have a very good experience with this. So bottom line is, we're here to support you. You can email us anytime. You have unlimited access to web-based training materials and the videos and online, training sessions like we did today. You have telephone support. We find very few districts actually want to talk to us, and I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek. The truth of the matter is the program is really straightforward. We sometimes do have conversations with IT personnel because they want to have a little bit more discussion about the architecture of the software, the data system, or whatever. But you do have telephone support that is available to you. I promised you I was going to provide this information to you because I really do want you to have unfettered access directly to me. I will certainly delegate things out if deemed appropriate, but at least early on in your vision streaming endeavors with EyeSpy, I don't want you to have to jump through, hoops. I want you to just get the answers that you need. So email me. That's my email address, rterendi@visionquest2020.org. The websites are available to you as well. And you're going to get an email anyway with a link to today's recording. So I promised you guys I was going to try and get this done as quickly as possible. We're right at about 70 minutes. So what I'm going to do is, before I forget, I want to thank all of you. I don't know what all of your respective roles are within your organizations, but regardless of where you fit, you spent over an hour today on this topic. So I really do want to thank you on behalf of the children that you serve. And with that, I am more than happy to say that we're done so that you guys can go about your day.